Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Britain's Hangout Hour, episode 77. I'm here today with John A. Douglas, noted YouTuber, author, coffee addict, maybe? I mean, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm not one to judge. I have a rather nasty Dr. Pepper addiction
It's not an
myself.
addiction. I can quit anytime I want.
and you wrote a you wrote your you've written some books, or you've written a book.
Uh, well, I've published a book. I've actually written several books that will never see the light of day. Funny story. God killed the computer that most of those other books I originally wrote were on. So they were bad enough. I guess even he didn't want anyone seeing them. That's kind of how I've taken it. Um, in the process of learning how to become a novelist, it's a long process, and there's that old adage that you're not your first book is going to be trash, and I'm certainly no exception. But the first book I wrote is not the first book that I published. I wrote maybe about I want to say four attempted novels and maybe six or seven half finished novels that were all stored on a computer. And then in 2016, I was caught up in the Thousand Year Flood. You might have heard about it on the news. And one of the first things to go was anything that was at ground level that was about ankle high. That's where my computer tower was, and that was one of the first things to bite the dust. It was gone. I don't know what happened to those books, but they're gone, and probably for the better because what I've made since then is a lot better.
Fair enough. But yeah, you wrote the Black Crown, and you've become known in the indie community. So yeah,
Relatively speaking, for what it's worth, yes.
um, yeah, I actually first found you. I saw that like Razor Fist was on your channel at one point, and
Yes.
and I saw your channel. I'm like, oh, this guy seems pretty cool. So yeah, I started watching your
Appearances are
channel.
deceiving.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
It was very
So
it was very gracious of Razorfist to come on to talk about his books. He was a great guest. We had a great conversation talking about a lot of books, and I hope to talk to him again one day. Yeah, the dude knows his stuff. I've actually been listening to some of his Shadowcast episodes just because I want to get a good feel for the Shadow. It was a character that I had never really paid much attention to in the past, and Razorfist has this really good way of convincing you why you should read or watch something, and explains in a lot of really great detail that just kind of resonates with me.
fair enough. I mean, I've watched a couple of his videos. Like his Solomon Kane video, because I'm also a fan of Robert E. Howard, so I'm always looking for good Robert E. Howard content. Which unless you're Conan, then that's pretty scarce.
Right, right. He's a big fan of Solomon Kane too. I read what was it, Red Shadows, if I'm not mistaken. That one was a really good one. Was it Red Shadows or was it something else?
I always get that mixed up with the. I think you're right. I think that is a Solomon Kane story. I do have the collection over here. Maybe I'll pull it out in a minute. But yeah, no, it's yeah. I mean, it's kind of funny with Howard. I think that I mean, I like Solomon Kane a lot because I have a bit of a fascination in Puritans. But I think like Conan is like better written overall. I mean, there's some great stories in the Solomon Kane saga, but I mean, I don't know if Right Hand of Doom is quite as excellent as something like the Frost Giant's Daughter from Conan. Um,
I haven't touched too much Robert E. Howard myself, but I do have the collected works of Conan, all the ones that Robert E. Howard wrote, at the very least, all in ebook form. I want to get the hardcover one day. Just one of those things I want to have on my shelf. And completely respect what the guy did. I mean, a lot of them old school authors really were really inspiring in just their prose and how they approach their work, and their prolificy especially was equally admirable. Walter B. Gibson, I've mentioned this before in the past. Walter B. Gibson, the author who created the Shadow and
mm-hmm.
wrote most of the Shadow plays, most of the Shadow comics. There's a meme that I have somewhere talking about he wrote enough shadow novels per year and enough Shadow plays and comics to afford like a two-story Manhattan apartment during the height of the Depression. Like, this guy was putting out upwards of 20 pulp novels a year. for
Didn't he get like a Guinness World Record?
yes. To my knowledge, he still holds the Guinness World Record of having written the most amount of words about a single fictional character.
Wow, that's ridiculous.
I know. Yeah, but it's in his 80s. He famously said that he complained he could only write upwards of about 6 shadow novels per year. In his 80s, he could only write 6. Like, I mean, talk about knowing your craft and being able to put it out there, unfailingly. That is impressive and inspiring to me as another author. Another author whose prolificacy is very inspiring is Blaine Pardoe of BattleTech and now Land and Sea fame.
Oh,
He's been working on Land and Sea now for a year, and he's already got like 7 novels out. And
yeah,
I'm just
isn't that the guy who got like kicked out of
yes.
BattleTech for some
Mm.
reason? I didn't really get involved in that crap.
Yeah, there was a cancellation over political issues, and he got booted out. And not just the BattleTech fiction novels, but BattleTech source books. This man was very integral in the BattleTech community and in the production of BattleTech. And over these political issues, he got booted out, and then almost immediately landed right on his feet with a 3-point superhero landing, and started taking off with something that was very similar concept, and it's been rolling over at Wargate, where he gets published now for a good year. 7 books into it, and they're about to crowdfund their first graphic novel, and they're getting ready to start playtesting their tabletop game that's associated with it.
So it sounds like he's doing pretty good, even though he got
Yeah.
canceled, whatever the hell that means
Yeah,
nowadays.
yeah, yeah. I interviewed him on the first episode of my author interview series, The Author's Outpost, and he's a very nice man. He's a very generous person and he's a great writer too. You can tell when you read his books that all those decades of experience in writing military sci-fi just are just like second nature to him. It's like he just puts it out there with a prolific, writing output that is admirable.
So have you read like Larry? I can never pronounce the dude's last name. It's like Correa, Korea.
Larry Correa. I've heard of Larry, and I see him on social media. I have not taken the dive into his Monster Hunter International
Hmm.
series. Heard good things. No malicious reason. Just haven't gotten around to it.
Well, yeah, I know. I know on that kind of Iron Age side of the internet. I know that he is well respected.
I would say so. He's a very good case for an indie author who got picked up by a traditional publisher and managed to, roll that into a very successful career. And good for him. Uh, I've run across a lot of indie authors or indie author wannabes, mostly on the romantasy side of things. I try not to talk to them too much because a lot of them seem to be very much of the mindset that being traditionally published is they seem to want the prestige of that more than they want to just get their books out in front of readers. And a lot of them have the false belief that an indie author cannot, if you've self-published, you're branded with a scarlet letter, and a traditional publisher will never touch you for the rest of your life, which is flat out not true in any way, shape, or form. There's several authors I can cite off the top of my head: Alexander Darwin, Larry Correa, Travis Baldree got picked up by Tor. It's not, and I think you're going to see that going forward in the future. That
Josiah Bancroft is one I can think of.
yeah, you're going to see that going forward in the future. That very successful indie authors are going to end up getting picked up by traditional publishers. They're going to start seeing that indie authors with significant fan bases and followings on social media are going to be the ones they're looking out for.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been trying to dip my toe more into the indie community. I'm actually, speaking of that, I'm actually hoping to start. I've been kind of distracted so far this month, but I'm hoping to start the Legend of Blackjack soon.
It's been on my radar, and I haven't gotten around to it yet.
I met the author. I actually had him on the show, and
Yeah,
I
I've
mean,
heard
great
good
guy,
things.
and the book sounds really cool too. So bonus. Um, but yeah, I mean that's yeah, I've been dipping my toes in it. It's interesting.
Indie fantasy these days is really killing it. I kind of wandered onto the scene about 2020 or so, where I was just getting really dissatisfied with the state of modern mainstream entertainment. And traditional publishing was kind of in the middle of a shift away from a lot more, male focused literature and leaning more into what's now kind of developed into the romantasy genre. It's much more of a female readership, and it's driven, in that community. But it's also kind of left a lot of people wanting more traditional or interesting or grimdark stuff behind. And I even have indie grimdark authors that I know that have told me behind the scenes that they've queried before and been told by publishers that we love your book and this is great, but this isn't what we're publishing right now. We can't do it either because this is not the content we're pushing, or because you're the wrong demographic. And to me, that's a shame, because I have read some indie fantasy that is absolutely fantastic stuff that deserves to be out there in front of a wider audience and pushed, because these days we do not get a lot of really good, innovative, and groundbreaking fantasy in the traditional publishing spaces. It's very much it's very much chasing a different sorts of trends that are end up leaving a lot of other readers behind, because they're pushing a genre, they're pushing a trend that's not everyone's cup of tea at the moment.
Well, yeah, no, I've definitely noticed some trends in. I don't know if it's traditional publishing, but there definitely seems to be trends that come along, like grimdark, like
Yeah.
God, 10 years ago, maybe even longer than that, and then now like the romantasy thing. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I tried Fourth Wing, and I only got like a couple chapters in, and I couldn't do it anymore. So there you go.
Well, it's definitely not written with a male dominated audience in mind.
Well, of
And
course,
I've
right.
actually kind of looked into it somewhat, because I wanted to understand, what's the appeal of the books to this audience. And uh, long to make it a little give it a long story short, more or less you have kind of an inversion of what appeals to different readers. With a lot of male readers, what you are interested in is the plot, the world building especially, and a lot of the intrigue. If you do have romance in one of these kind of books, it's usually like an afterthought of some kind.
Hmm.
And when you have when you have a romance novel, or a romantasy in this case, it's the inverse of that. The romance is the main plot, the main conflict. Everything else is just kind of window dressing around it. It's essentially they're essentially bodice rippers with a bit of a fantasy window dressing over them, if that
Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah, yeah. I read Fourth Wing, and it reminded me. I got some pretty traumatic flashbacks to reading something like Divergent back in the day, because yeah.
A lot of the
Not.
YA and romantasy, there's a lot of overlap with the audience there.
I'll be nice and just say it's not for me.
That that's usually what most folks' reaction is, because what your wants to be developed is much more of the world building and the plot and a lot of the elements, and it really is just kind of window dressing to what they actually want there, which is the romance aspects.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's quite interesting. Though there was stuff I noticed in Fourth Wing particularly where I was like, my God, how did this get published? And I actually wrote a novel myself, and I just haven't really done anything. Well, I have started editing it, so I'm not like haven't done anything with it, but I don't know what to do with it, because indie kind of looks sexy, but at the same time I'm like, well, I'm young, I think I could maybe try doing pub in trad pub, but I don't know. And then there's people who are like, oh, you'll throw your writing away, and I'm like, well, I mean, I don't really buy into that. I mean, there are writers like Terry Goodkind where I have no freaking idea how he got published,
I
or
can tell
Dan
you
Brown.
exactly. I can tell you exactly how Terry Goodkind got published, because he got published in the 90s. That's a very big part of it, because I don't know how old you are, but I was a teenager in the 90s, and I was, between 1 and 10 in the 80s, and there was very much kind of a cultural shift in American culture's mindset at that time, where in the 80s, there was a lot more binary good and evil and altruistic heroism present in media at the time. You look that was expressed mostly through its cartoons and a lot of the movies as well. Good was good, evil was evil, and the bad guys were evil because they were evil and they like being evil. And Skeletor is a good example of that. But when you get into the 90s, story and a lot of the fantasy reflected that as well. That's when the mass paperback novel craze of fantasy really started, was in the mid to late 80s. And then you get into the 90s and the mindset of the country's kind of changing. Things get a little grittier, darker. Anti-heroes are more popular than their altruistic hero counterparts. And fantasy was no exception. And two of the authors I think that benefited from that the most was Australian author Sarah Douglas. I'm sorry, Sarah Douglas. I only recently found out that I was pronouncing her name wrong for like 20 years. It's
Yeah,
Sarah.
I saw you just recently put a video out there. I have to ask this because I can't help myself here. But did you talk about her because she has the same last name as you?
I I have the same last name as her because it's my homage to her. Because
Wait,
she
so
was such an
your actual last name isn't Douglas?
no, no.
What?
Johnny Douglas is my author name.
Oh shit. Okay, well, that could have fooled me. It seemed like a normal enough name.
Right. She spelled her with two S's, but Sarah Douglas was right up there with Terry Goodkind. They were writing fantasy that had a much more mature edge to it. It was fantasy with a bite to it, and that kind of helped them. And readers started to have an appetite at that time for much thicker and long-lived novel series. Gone are the kind of pulps of the past where it's the story's one and done and they don't interconnect to each other. Now you have 5, 6, 7, 8 books and they're all part of the same series telling different stories but with an overconnecting art. That pretty much got in. Terry Goodkind kind of got in on that wave early, I think, and it carried him through for a long time in spite of his flaws. uh, I'm not surprised he got published at all.
Well,
That's
I
just kind
just
of how
thought
the direction it took.
I just thought the Sword of Truth was generic crap. That's all I'm
Mm.
saying. I mean, if you can publish that, I mean, I really can't go behind the traditional publishing has higher writing standards.
No,
I've
no,
read a
and they
Dan Brown novel. Okay, there's been some bad stuff that's gotten through or Fourth Wing as well. But
right,
I
and
don't want to beat up Fourth Wing too much.
too much. No, but the thing is, it's the publishers. They're hanging on by a thread and have been for a long time. They're clinging. Their big money cows are the big names. Right now, Brandon Sanderson's basically holding up a lot of the fantasy genre. Fortunately, he's a very nice guy. And there's a couple of big names out there, and they're doing all the heavy lifting. So what are the publishers doing? They're going to where the fans are. And so that's why you're seeing a lot of books that are coming out of the TikTok space. Because if you've got, I think Sarah J. Maas, she got big on TikTok first, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, she got a big one of them got a big TikTok
She
following.
started getting big like right as I was getting out of high school. So yeah, like not too long ago.
Now, from my perspective, she's just kind of here, but she's got like a lot of novels now. It's like a tower of it that thick. But um, you're seeing authors with big TikTok followings get publishing deals because they have fans. They have fans that are going to unfailingly want to buy their book. Another good example of this is Eric July with the Rippaverse,
Mm-hmm.
and where he spent 10 years building up.
It's funny he got so big. I remember him back when he was doing ANCAP metal back in the day. I don't know if you followed him for very long, but I used to run around in right wing political circles, and I remember Eric July. He was a big name in that kind of.
Yeah,
So yeah,
he
when I saw him getting his comic book thing going, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. Yeah, I remember him.
but he developed a YouTube following, a significant YouTube following over 10 years. And when he decided, what, I'm just going to do it myself, he had a built-in audience ready to go there. He didn't need Marvel, he didn't need DC to get his comic book out there. And I think that's the impetus for a lot of creators in the Iron Age. We have our the own means and methods by which we can publish our books, our comics. We can crowdfund. We are our own marketers. We're our own platforms. And to me, that really puts way more control in our hands to make what we want. Not everything will, flourish. A lot of things will flop. But as the Macho Man always said, the cream always rises to the top.
Not a admittedly, I'm not much of a wrestling guy, but yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and we've already kind of seen that. There's a bit of a with indie fantasy, especially. There's a bit of a community that's kind of popped up around it, and several of the booktubers that tend to cover it and read it and review those books. I came in maybe about 3-4 years after it had just started to kind of pop off the indie publishing on Amazon, and I thought, oh, this is a little more viable. And to me, it's better because at the very least, you're getting your book out in front of readers. Yeah, you're having to do a lot more work with marketing. But if you look at interviews and social medias of some lesser known authors for traditional publishing houses, a lot of them complain that they don't get pushed or marketed as much as the bigger authors, and they get asked by the publishing houses that they're hired to, hey, can you go? Can you? They complain that they get asked to go out there and do more, increase their social media presence, do more TikToks, do more YouTube live streams and stuff. And the audience is out here on the internet, and they're not going to like book signings necessarily. So, uh, to me, indie authors, you're at least getting your books in front of a readership. Whereas if you were taking the traditional publishing route, you've written your book, you're handing it to an editor, and it's rotting on a slush pile with about 10,000 other books. And they're way more brutal than your average reader picking up your book off of Amazon. Those editors, they'll DNF your book after like a paragraph or two if it doesn't catch them immediately. So going at it your own, I kind of romanticize it a little bit, but to me, it's worth it. It's a grind, but it's worth it.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I never imagined it would be easy because, well, you're doing it by yourself. I also imagine it takes a lot of money and time and sweat and probably a couple of showers where you have a good cry. I mean, I wouldn't blame you if that happened during the process.
It's definitely not going to put you in the black for a long time.
Bashing your head
You got
against the wall. Am I getting
a,
it
a,
wet?
a little bit, I mean, I published my first book back in November. I've only just now gotten to where I've recouped about half the cost of the cover, which is fine, but it's not, still got a ways to go before I eventually get that back. But to me, building up my brand over time is what's going to eventually lead to, uh, not just profits from the book, but also from YouTube, Twitter, other spaces. Eventually I hope to be at a point where, I've got enough income that the books essentially kind of fund themselves. That's the big dream at the very least. And,
Yeah, it's
for now,
actually. Oh, sorry. Finish
no,
what you
no,
were
go
gonna
ahead.
say. Oh, I was just gonna say, yeah. I mean, the other thing I've been told by people who have told me not to go into self publishing is the effort isn't worth the cost. Is pretty much to keep it simple. Now I'm like, I mean, I'm a pretty stubborn guy. I don't like being told what to do, but I do take those things into consideration though, because I'm not completely
I mean,
big-headed.
from a business perspective, yeah, it can seem like you're putting in a lot of effort, energy, and money into something that's not paying off as much. But to me, building something worthwhile is going to take time. And there's that old adage, in order to make money, in order to make money, you got to spend money to make money. That's what it is. And
Fair
to
point.
me,
Fair
I
point.
just look at it as an investment in, what I'm making down the future. And, eventually I can have enough people that will enjoy this enough that, maybe I can make a living of it one day. Who knows? Um, but I think it beats, it's very emotionally fulfilling from a creative standpoint. It's emotionally cathartic. It's satisfying. Um, you have done something that a lot of people in their life claim to want to do and do not do. You have written a novel. and you've managed to, publish it. And it's, a little bit of a headache figuring out how to get it published, via Amazon. I actually kind of gave up on a couple of the steps, and I just told my editor, look, will you just edit this for me, please? I'll pay you a little extra. Please just edit. I need to get this out there. I'm tired of fooling with it. And it's a headache for me sometimes a headache for me to learn stuff, because I'm Gen X, but a very late Gen X, but I've got a boomer sense of technology. So,
I mean,
while I do appreciate and love being able to do every step myself, at some point I just kind of got to outsource the real headaches to somebody else.
yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, I've only just written it. I haven't even tried publishing it yet, but it takes a lot of time and effort to do. So
Anything worth doing is.
that's true. That's true. What was it that Teddy Roosevelt once said? Um, oh, well, it's basically to what you just said.
Anything worth doing is worth doing well. Is that it?
Something like that. Here, let me look it up. My friend Jason shared this quote once. I can't believe I really like Theodore Roosevelt a lot. So,
Sorry, I had to tell one of my coworkers, no, I do not want to work the 4th of July.
oh,
That's a family holiday.
You're going to do something worthwhile, and you're going to have to work hard and do the things you set out to do. So there you
Not bad, not bad.
go. Some good wisdom from Theodore Roosevelt.
July 4th is a Thursday this year. Okay, good. Good to know.
But yeah,
Gotta make...
but yeah, you run a YouTube channel. You've become quite known. I remember reading some negative reviews you got on your book, and you've gotten some vitriol.
A little bit.
There's one, I won't name him here, but they basically said that you harass reviewers. I'm like, okay.
Oh, that's over on the Goodreads.
Yeah.
That's because I know exactly who that is. That is somebody that didn't like me on Twitter. And I knew this was bound to happen, because on Twitter, I kind of treat it like a mosh pit, and I just go up there every morning and start swinging. And I've had a couple tweets, both on my old account and my new one, that kind of pop off. And, sometimes I piss off whole communities, and, they re about it for a couple of days, and then they forget I exist. So it's not a big deal. And I'm monetized anyway. So it still ends up putting a couple bucks in my bank account. That goes straight to the books as well, by the way. And this particular clown is a bit of an armchair quarterback that has never written anything, but thinks he knows how to write other people's books better than they do, and goes out of his way to constantly try and tell people that he's got a dummy account on Goodreads. And if you click on the account that said that, you'll notice that every indie author book that they reviewed is all 1 star. So I don't take that particular review to heart, because I know it's in extremely bad faith. It's not real. They just wanted to downvote me because they don't like me. But it is what it is, and I kind of figured I was going to get a couple of those.
I also imagine once you put your work out there, you're just kind of like, you know what? I'm probably going to take a couple hits. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Something like that.
You have to be thick-skinned when you put your work out there. There is a bit of an existential crisis you have not long after you publish your book, where you're like, oh God, I wrote this book, but now people are actually going to read it. Oh shit. So you've got to expect there's going to be some criticism that comes your way, and just be prepared to brush it off. I mean, look, I got a couple of 1-star reviews. A couple people didn't care for the book. I've also gotten reviews from people that I greatly respect that also enjoyed it. Dr. John Morrow enjoyed my book.
I saw John Morrow liked your book, so
John Morrow liked my book, and
right.
he's a very well respected member of kind of the booktube community, and he said it was a great break in between the soul crushing grimdark novels he normally reads. It made him happy. Blaine Pardoe read my book, and I didn't even expect that he would. And he gave me a lot. He didn't even give me any critique about it. He praised it. That meant a lot to me. Fellow indie author Louis Mogglehouse. He probably has my favorite review of the book. He didn't like the prologue, and he was like, the early chapters are a little slow for his taste, and but he was glad that he pushed through, because by the time he got through reading it, it was one of his favorite indie books. And he said, and I quote, "It made him feel happy." And that's the only thing I really want for anybody that reads my books. I want you to be entertained. I know we can get lost in the sauce, and we can miss the forest through the trees and get stuck in all the process of writing a book the right way or the wrong way. But at the end of the day, your book, at the very least, ought to entertain somebody. And that's all I really wanted for my book, was to be entertaining, because we're in a point now where a lot of the corpo entertainment we get from movies and books and comics is just not entertaining, and it is downright at times reprehensible, if not completely incompetent on a creative scale. So I left that behind, and I wrote the kind of books that I want to read. And I like reading my own book. I'll occasionally read my own book. Of course, I've read it like 5 times by now through the editing process, so it'll probably be a while before I read it again. But all I want from my readers is that they walk away with a smile on their face and feel that their time was not wasted, and that they had fun.
I mean, I don't know if
And
I don't know if I would read my book. I wrote it, so I was kind of reading it as as I
but
was,
I'm one of them weirdos that occasionally goes back and likes reading my own work. So not everybody's like me, admittedly.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I can be very neurotic about that stuff.
I know, especially if you've got a very critical eye and you start going, "Oh, I shouldn't have wrote that. I shouldn't have wrote this." But at some point, I could have kept the Black Crown under wraps until I had more things like maps and illustrations. But at the end of the day, sometimes you just gotta put the damn thing out there. You got to shit or get off the pot, as we said in the construction field.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, this might be a bit predictable, but like, I am curious. But like, what attracts you to the fantastic in general? Oh, sorry, my alarm's going off.
What attracts me to the fantastic is just the being able to see something you don't normally see, being able to go somewhere that only your imagination can picture. You know, science fiction and fantasy are great ciphers for this, and I have a very vivid imagination that uh, really took to the fantastic. Of course, it helps that I grew up in the '80s and the '90s, and a lot of the media that we had was very inventive, creative. Especially on the animation side, which I was inspired by a lot of animation. Just sometimes you find stuff that's cool and interesting and just way out there, and then sometimes you find stuff that's just banking on just the rule of cool, and it's just awesome to watch. It just triggers a part of your psyche. Your neurons start firing, and you're like, oh, this is great, and I got to have more of it. So
One of my pet peeves is when people go, "Oh, you watch cartoons?" I'm like,
yeah,
you know what? I like animated
some of the
stuff. Go
best
fuck
some of the
yourselves.
best stories that I've ever seen, and some of the best entertainment I've ever had has come through animation, especially '90s animation. It was a golden era.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I mean, my favorite animated show, Batman the Animated Series, that was in the '90s. So
yeah,
I grew up watching
that
that.
was Batman was good. The Superman was also good, but you also had like Gargoyles. Exo Squad was a fantastic soap opera, a wartime space opera. That stuff was really good. There was more I could name, but like it just was imaginative. It was fun. Beast Wars was another one I really liked, and it could be fun and entertaining while also telling great stories at the same time. And that's where I learned a lot of like storytelling technique, and not necessarily from the novel side. Once I kind of started getting into fantasy novels, because I initially started in Star Wars, the expanded universe. I read that through the '90s and 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
But once I hit fantasy, it just started to snowball. And, I was, voracious reader, reading just any fantasy I wanted. Sometimes I just pick books up off the rack at the library, or, at the grocery store where they, sell mass printed paperbacks, and just grab one, go with it. Didn't even look at the blurb. Just the art on the cover looks cool, so I grab it and go. And I've rarely been disappointed by buying books like that. I've always been a cover buyer.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm a bit of a cover snob myself. What can I say? A lot of people are like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, good cover will take you places."
Yeah, I've gotten in some arguments over the last couple of weeks with some people who were kind of arguing about that. But look, and this is the kind of cover that I like, so I couldn't do anything less than for my own book. I made the exact kind of
What were they
cover that
trying to do?
I
That whole "oh, your cover's gay, lol," that
no.
type of shit.
No, you have some pretentious indie authors out there that think your story needs to be what sells your book, but and if you're attracted to the book more by the cover than the actual content, you really just want a piece of art. Come on, that's being disingenuous about why about the very audience you're trying to sell your books to. Um, I am the kind of reader who would see a really cool cover and pick it up impulsively and buy it. So, I had to have the same kind of cover for myself. And a lot of these books up here, you want to talk about covers. That's another great strength of indie fantasy is their covers are killing it. And they're producing the kind of covers that you don't get anymore in the traditional publishing spheres. I'm going to pull a couple of them off here just to kind of show them off. This is The Hellborn King by my friend Chris
Oh,
Brenning.
I think Matt from Beard of Darkness talked to that guy. I recognize that
Yes,
name.
I talked to him too. And look, same cover artist that made my cover too. J. Caleb
Oh,
Designs, good friend. Let me see who's got another one. This one's a really recent one by Dirk Ashton and David Estes. Kraken Rider Z. Now tell me you wouldn't buy that based on just the title and the cover alone.
I mean, it looks. I mean, that is a great cover. Yeah.
My camera's really not even doing a lot of these justice. Here's one. This is another one. One of the first indie fantasies that I bought. This is a cover by for me, The Seventh Cadence by Jim Wilburn. He got one of the Magic the Gathering artists to make the cover for his book.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
I know him. I wanted to get him on this show. I just haven't gotten around to it because
oh, he'd love to come talk to you. He loves talking about his books.
I'd be a,
Jim's a good friend, and it. So that's a good example. Indie fantasy is making great covers, and they're picking up the kind of readers that are drawn to those kind of covers as well, or at least the ones that know that they're there.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, well, I do have Philip Chase's book. Philip Chase's book, The Way of Edan, had a great cover. Looks very nice. So
Yeah, I like that. I like that stained glass quality to it. That's another great thing about the indie fantasy authors is their willingness to experiment and do something that's just a little off kilter and a little different from the mainstream. So, and that ends up making them stand out. Talk about Nick Horvath. You had him on that. His cover is a banger too. I like that, especially how it looks like a.
I'm hoping to pick that up at some point. He's a good dude.
He is, and what I
Freakishly
really like
tall
about
too.
this, huh? He would.
Freakishly tall too.
Oh, is he? I had no idea.
Well, he used to play basketball, so.
Oh well. I always like hearing about authors with different backgrounds because you never know what their background is going to end up bringing into the work. It always ends up being, there's always a little something. Like I mentioned, Blaine Pardo. He's got that background in, military history and military sci-fi, and that is very easy to see in his writing. Who else? Sarah Douglas, another one that I mentioned. She was a failed romance writer before she moved into fantasy, and she brought those sensibilities of writing romance with that. Like one of her books starts with a love triangle, which she admitted later on was kind of cringy, and she tried to like rectify that in a little bit in later books. I know Brian Asher's another one. He's like a former professional wrestler. I'm trying to think of who else had some interesting backgrounds here. Devin Erickson, who's actually getting interviewed today by Beard of Darkness. He said on stream he's a former software engineer, and his dad was one of the people that worked on the original Voyager. spacecraft. So like, and I'm in the middle of reading his book right now, and it really, you can see that kind of pedigree. Those two experiences are really kind of coming through in every sentence of this book. You can tell this was written by somebody that knows a lot about software engineering and a lot about space travel. And that's the cool thing, every author's got their unique and individual voice. And being an indie author, that voice doesn't really get filtered out as much. I think in TradPub, you do have some of that filtered out a little bit because they're trying to appeal more to a mass market, whereas whereas in the indie spaces, your voice is allowed to kind of shine, and it helps give an interesting quality to what you write.
Well, yeah, I mean, I also read, I actually also read Wistful Ascending by Joe Byrne, which is a really
Oh,
good book,
yeah, I've got to read
actually.
that. It's
Um,
really high on my TBR. I've got to get to that this year at
I mean,
least.
if you like old school superhero stories, and
And I
also
do.
if you like Star Trek,
Yeah.
you'll dig it. I know I
I
did. It was also surprising. There was a lot more depth there than I was like. I thought it would be more kind of like a fun adventure story. It definitely is that, but there was some depth in there I wasn't expecting. So, well, I already did a video with Joe talking about it. So,
He's a nice guy,
yeah, he's a good dude.
and
He's good people.
his books look great, and I've been wanting to get them for a while. So it's kind of high on my list. But that's the unfortunate problem with being a book reviewer and a book enjoyer. There's more books coming out than I could possibly keep up with. If I could go back about 20 years, I'd probably keep up with a lot more releases. And, I've read some series. I kind of wish I could take back reading the entire Sword of Truth series. Um, I don't know why I stuck with it as long as I did. I should have read Wheel of Time, although
Were you intrigued by the BDSM blowjob rape? Like, was that
no, not so much. Not so much. Honestly, there were elements that drew me in. I
or the
was
rants about objective morality and Ayn
right,
Rand
yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, Terry was a bit. Terry was on the pretentious side about what he was writing, and thought his themes were a lot more important than the genre he was writing in. I can see why a lot of people, would be turned off by his writing. I was generally invested in the character. He did write some decent characters, and I think the overall conflict with the Imperial Order, I kind of wanted to know how that ended. Even though the penultimate book, that was the end of his series, or where that conflict was ended, kind of had this section where it's hard to explain, but I not only DNF'd it, I actually was at work reading it, getting tired of it, and I closed it and threw it across the room into a trash can. And then later I was like, no, I'm gonna want to know how the book ends. So I went and fished it back out, and I finished it. It wasn't quite worth it, but eventually I did power through and make it to the end of that. Although if that did that to me, odds are if I went to the Wheel of Time, by the time I got to the slog, I probably would have DNF'd that as well, because I've been warned about that. I haven't gotten
Yeah,
past book one of Wheel of Time.
yeah, I've never really been all that interested in Wheel of Time. It just like every time I've heard about it from people, I'm just like, I don't think that would be for me. But again,
It
I'd
it
feel
might not.
I'd feel weird as a fantasy fan if I didn't at least like try it at one point. So I don't know. I'm not in any rush to read
It's
it. It's like with
it's
Sanderson.
yeah, it's definitely for a particular type of reader. Um, the word that I use for the Wheel of Time is that it's overindulgent. It's an amazing piece of
It's
literature, even
whopping
if it's
15 books long. So I can
yeah,
see where you're coming from.
and especially when you consider that there's several books that are just feels like it's wasting time. Um, Poor Robert Jordan, he didn't get to finish his series. Although it's great that they found somebody who did love his work as much as he did to finish it. Good old Brando Sando. But so fans at least got an ending. I kind of regret these days reading Game of Thrones as much as I enjoyed those books at the time that I read them, and enjoyed that
Yeah,
TV show.
that was speaking of that, the Game of Thrones. That was a That was a very formative series for me. I'm
Did you
like,
read all the
wow.
book? Did you read all the ones they have published?
Yep. I actually
Yeah.
want to read them again at some point because I want to see if it holds up better. And
I'm
also, I
kind
was
of
looking through them the other day. I'm like, wow, there's some stuff I missed. I forgot about.
Oh, he's a very dense writer. He puts a lot of shit in there. It's very enjoyable for that. I just kind of I'm kind of over the books and over the story because I know for certain that we will not get the book ending to the series. And I think there's a lot of Game of Thrones fans that are in denial about this. Like, guys, it's been like over 40,000 days since the last book. It's been 12 years.
I was about to say it's been more than a
And
decade.
the man is in his mid 70s. He has more money than he could ever possibly know what to do with. And the worst, and here's the thing in the pandemic, he had like a year and a half where he had nothing to do but sit at home and go nowhere and do nothing. And he still only got about half of Winds of Winter written. I know Gary from Neurotic kind of compiled about what was already written, like chapters he had already released, and some words on his blog. The way he figured it was basically rough. The book's roughly 50% done at last reckoning. But here's the thing: no one considers. Okay, because a lot of people are like, it's just 2 books. I don't think it is just 2 books. If you look at
If they
where
are
the
two
book
books, they're two thick ass books.
right,
Because there's
this is
so
what
many plot
nobody's
threads
saying.
in Game of Thrones. My God.
This is what nobody is saying, though. If you look at where he left off in the books and where he has to be to end the books, I don't think he could do it in just 2 books. Like he would have to super condense a lot of events and to get a lot of things right up because there were plot points that were never touched on that have not yet resolved. Lady Stoneheart was one that was never resolved. The fact that there's another Targaryen out there that
Mm-hmm.
that hasn't been addressed and probably never will be.
Are you talking
It's
about the show?
no, I'm talking about in the books. Like and near the end of the last book, it was revealed there was the baby
Mm-hmm.
Targaryen that they thought the Mountain killed was actually alive and a young man.
Well, yeah, I
Uh,
do remember that. I do remember that.
and there's so much more that has to be resolved. And the slow way he tells the stories, I don't think he can do it in 2 books. I really don't. He would need at least 3, and even then, he'd have to super condense a lot of stuff. Because I ain't gonna lie, the last book he put out, I can't remember which one it was. Dance with Dragons, I think. Like there were some meandering chapters in that one, especially like chapters following around Sir Davos trying to rebuild the support that Robert Baratheon needed, and it's like, what are you doing? Why are we following this guy? Where's all these other characters I liked? And it got tiresome, and I'm just kind of over it. I don't think at his age, with his lack of motivation, that he can do it.
I mean, if you want something similar, I mean, there is the first law. It is only a trilogy, so there you go.
I heard good things about Abercrombie. I haven't delved into it, but every good booktuber's got that 4-book series on their shelf. Malice and Wrath and all those. I know that's not the first law, but like everybody's got them.
So, hopefully you're going to avoid any Martin or Scott Lynch type of shenanigans where you won't be able to put out a book in 12 years.
Provided I'm in good health, I'll keep writing. Look, I've been writing for a lot longer than I've been published. There was a lot of life in the way in my writing, but like I've been writing since I was 13, and that was in the early 90s. And I was a hobby writer for a long time. I didn't make the decision to try to become a novel writer until I was in my early to mid 20s, in the mid 2000s or so, where I was writing something somewhere, and I thought to myself, this is really decent. I could probably do this for a living. And that was when I kind of made that choice. And then that was when I started trying to write my own novels and still was doing hobby writing on the side. And in the 2010s, there was a bit of a lull in both my writing and reading because I switched careers and it was a very rough transition in that period, having more kids and a bunch of other stuff. And, social media had started up by that point. By the time I got back into, and I got back into reading fantasy, like I mean, I maybe went a good 7, 8 years only reading 1 or 2 books a year. And what got me back into it was Kings of the Wild,
Mm.
which is a phenomenal
I actually
book.
have both of those books right over here. I haven't read them yet.
Love that book. Oh, I love that book. I listed it in my top 3 fantasy starters video. It's on my channel.
I do
I
love the
listed
cover
The
art, though.
Hobbit.
I'm a big fan of Richard
Yeah.
Anderson.
I listed The Hobbit, Dragonlance, and Kings of the Wild for a more modern example because it's easy to get into, it's fun, it's entertaining, and really, I think it may have one of the it has the best finale of any fantasy novel I've ever read, bar none. Like
All
I'm not
right,
even
I'll have
exaggerating.
to. I mean, I am planning on reading. I've been planning to read it for a while. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. But yes, I do have them over there.
Yeah, but be warned, the sequel, Bloody Rose, not as it doesn't quite hit as good as the first book did.
So, I guess another question I'm sure you've been asked a lot. So, what inspired you to write Black Crown, aside from your irritation with modern entertainment?
It started initially with messing around with the concept of D&D characters and uh, fantasy races. What kind of half breeds would you get if you mix two together? And I have a pair of goblin sisters in the book, Ollie and Izzy. Sorry, Ollie and Iggy. And I started messing around with them. I was like, well, what if I had a half elf, half goblin? What would that look like? What if she had a half sister who was half goblin but half orc? And I was like, and then I thought, what if I had a half orc who was a bit of a runt, or at least compared to other orcs, but he was, unlike a lot of half orcs. What if he was smart? What if he was really smart? And what if he wound up being in charge of a tribe of orcs? What would that look like? So I'm like, okay, I know what I want to write this book about. And I kind of worked that idea backwards. Figured out where I wanted the book to end. And then I worked backwards and reverse engineered the story until I found out where I wanted to start. And I just developed a lot of it around there. And the Black Crown wound up my desire to write a story that both uses a lot of traditional conventions in fantasy, but also, kind of turns them on their ear a little bit and does something a little different with them. Every character in, every character in the Black Crown is, both fulfills the conventions in which they're used, but also adds, a much different element to them, or it turns it on its head somewhat. The main character, Ragoth, on the cover, he is a bookish half orc. He's even tempered, good natured. He has perfect recall, and he's a knowledge sponge. He spent most of his life in isolation in a library wing of the castle he lives in. And, through shenanigans and circumstances, he's thrown into exile, and he has to find his father's orc tribe. So, he gets set off in that quest, and makes a couple of friends that help him along the way. And the second of which is Cortland. He's the second POV character of the book. And Cortland was my desire to kind of do something a little different with the farm boy wanting to be an adventurer trope, where he did that and didn't get very far, and he got stuck in a low rent guard job. Rather than being, the usual, kind of altruistic, heroistic type, he wants to be a knight because he feels that he's better than the little rural town he grew up in. He's my idea of what if Gaston from Beauty and the Beast decided, I've had enough of this town. I'm better than this town, better than the people. I'm better than Belle. I'm better than everyone here. I don't need this.
Hopefully, he's not as much of a narcissistic jerk as Gaston is.
Oh no, he's still a narcissistic jerk. He just thinks he's better than the surroundings, and he decides to, rather than be a big fish in a small pond, he'll go try and be a bigger fish in the ocean with the rest of the big fishes. And we meet him at the beginning of the book. He's kind of, circumstances are starting to wither away. He's tired of his job. He's tired of his boss. A little real life experience I kind of put in there myself, and he decides to strike out and runs into Rags. They have another character that comes with them named Denny. Denny is essentially helpless. Denny is a religious goodwill worker for a sect known as the Unexalted Faith. and he doesn't know how to use magic. He can't hunt. He can hardly cook. The most he can do is clean up. And
Can't really
so,
do too much.
yeah, he's like Sam without all the helpfulness to it. He's just moral support along for the ride, and they use what little money they have to hire someone to protect them to get them to the lawless lands of Dreadmore, where the orcs live. It's across the continent, and they hire the services of Mora, who is what's known as an auroch. She's looks like a half minotaur, but she's got a human head, horns, hooves, the whole deal. And
Hmm.
she's a retired adventurer. She's a world weary, type who's down on her luck. She can't turn down the gold, even though she doesn't want to, babysit a bunch of green adventurers on their first go around.
She doesn't want
So
to. She doesn't want to deal with a bunch of idiots. I
no,
hear you.
no, she's done that before, and but she's, like I said, she can't afford to turn down the gold being offered to her, so she reluctantly goes along with them, and off they go on a lot of adventures and happenstance, and where the story goes from there. To avoid spoilers, I can't reveal too much, but really, that's what I always love when it comes to a good adventure is I wanted to write the kind of adventure that felt like you were there with them, and you were going on an adventure with friends you wanted to hang out with, through everything that was dangerous and fun and interesting and exciting, and trying to keep things fresh and interesting the entire way there.
I see. I mean, were there any like books in particular or whatever media that were like that really informed when you were writing Black Crown?
A lot of it was kind of formatted on the idea of your fun tabletop D&D style adventures, where most of the time, most of the fun that you're having is trying going along with your friends and trying to solve these problems together and facing these dangers together. When it came to character creation, I have a system called the 3 C's: contrast, complement, and conflict. And I use this to kind of inform on creating characters that are all very distinct and unique, but different from each other. So the conflicts they have with each other are arise from their differences in their personalities. Or Rags is book smart but not street smart. He's good natured. Cord, on the other hand, is street smart but not very book smart. But he's also very fiery tempered and uh, you know vulgar and outspoken. Whereas Rags is regal because he's a prince. Uh, Cortland was born dirt poor. It's those kind of differences that lead to the way they complement each other, the way these characters kind of mesh together, and it makes for fun conflicts, but it also makes for good camaraderie as well. I learned a lot of that watching 90s tunes. Really good stuff where they took that exact same approach, and it's the differences of these distinct characters that make them so interesting to watch.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, going, you talked about I see you've talked about D&D on your channel. I'm kind of surprised that you like Critical Role because I've seen some of your tweets, and you seem kind of like a old school, kind of conservative kind of guy, and Critical Role is not that.
Uh, well, when it comes to Critical Role, because I started binging it in 2020 when in the middle of the pandemic, when I was working practically 7 days a week for months on end.
I've only
And
seen the first two campaigns, and I liked them a lot. And I also watched the
yeah,
animate. I actually got into it because the animated show.
oh, the shows are great.
Oh, the show was fantastic. Oh
A
my
couple
god.
hiccups in the first season that kind of had me rolling my eyes, but season two eliminated all those problems
Oh
that I
really?
had with it. Yeah, the kind of there was a little too much, not too much, but there was enough of that kind of that just happened Marvel humor that really kind of it felt a little out of place with the rest of the tone. And there was one moment, if you remember, in the at the end where they're in the acid trap,
Oh
and
yeah.
Pike says, "Oh, an acid trap? That's real original. You may as well have just panned the camera back and broken the fourth wall entirely." Like to me, that was terrible. But season two didn't have any of that, and it really shone because of it. And I
Oh,
was
I
actually
really loved
asked myself
season
the other day,
one.
but wait a minute, shouldn't season three have been here by now?
I know. Yeah.
And
Oh.
they announced recently, they said, we'll let you know when we know. Apparently, they're working on that. They're working on an adaptation of the Mighty Nine, which I'm also excited for because I loved Campaign 2. Its filler arcs notwithstanding. But
I really enjoyed the first season myself. Those
yeah,
first two episodes are like, okay, yeah, it's kind of what I was expecting. And then when we get to the just like the point we meet the damn it, I can't the Briarwoods.
yeah.
The
Well, that's
Briarwoods
what
then on fucking oh my god. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
great season of
really, really
television.
good. I'm probably gonna go watch it an episode with my son because he wanted to watch it not that long ago. I'm actually almost done binging see Vox Machina. I'm on episode 109 today. And so I don't have much longer to go. And it's one of the live shows. And I got to tell you, the live shows are really great. The audience adds a lot to the
Mm-hmm.
enjoyment of the show. Uh, the show's a lot easier to enjoy if you completely ignore the social media of the cast members and all the other ancillary stuff that they do, and just take it as kind of a visual novel. That's how I look at Critical Role. It's essentially a visual novel with occasional dice rolling. I know there's a lot of OG D&D fans that are like that. Really it rubs them the wrong way because it's not entirely a D&D game right by the rules, right? Like it's half D&D, half homebrew, but it's also half half improv theater with occasional dice rolls, and they can't really accept that for some reason. I didn't have a problem with it, and it wasn't until I think campaign 3 that a lot of the excuse me, I had barbecue burgers for supper, and it's starting to kick my ass back. I didn't. A lot of the more cringy, like say political elements that are present in its fan base, as well as the cast members, don't really show up until in like campaign 3. Campaigns 1 and 2, like all that stuff was really kind of missing. It's not in the show itself, so I was able to really kind of enjoy that. But I ain't gonna lie, campaign 3 not as good. It's been a slog,
Yeah, I've
and a
heard
lot of
that.
other
I've
fans
I've
have
seen
complained
clips.
too.
I've seen like clips and stuff. I just have a hard time because like I can't sit there for 4 hours, and like watch as much as I
Yeah,
enjoy watching them all play together and the chemistry they have is insane. But it's just kind of like it's like 4 hours. You're just sitting
yeah,
there.
that's the thing. That's why it's taken me so long to binge it, is because I binge it in bursts, usually listening while I'm at work doing something else. Because I've always done that, like listen to like
It's
talk radio or
probably it's
something.
probably it's probably the best way to do it. I
Yeah,
just don't I just sit around in my office a lot. So I don't
I'm
really.
always doing other stuff while while I'm, and it's just kind of in my ear is a bit of a story, and because they have distinct voices, I can I can separate them, and I'm just mostly listening to them. Although admittedly, some of these episodes I'm even skipping past some of the battles that like last an hour. I'm like, okay, this not necessary. I want to get to the story. I want to get done with Vox Machina. I'm ready. I'm ready to be done. So I can just be binging campaign 3, and hopefully that's going to end soon too, because I'm not going to lie. That campaign, not just a slog, a lot of the characters were very hit or miss comparatively to previous seasons. That's not helping. And then there's been some BS with the storytelling in campaign 3 that I have not cared for it at all.
I mean, from what I've seen, I think I might. I don't know if you would. I don't know what you would say about this, but I actually think Matt Mercer might be one of the best world builders I've ever seen.
Oh,
Up
that's
there
undisputed.
with like he's up there with like the best
He's never
fantasy
boring.
authors. Like
If this guy decided to go into novel writing, he would be it would be masterful, right? And I think that goes unappreciated because when I started playing D&D with my kids, the only way we could play it was if I was the DM. So I had to learn how to be a DM.
mm-hmm.
This is in like 2018, 2019, after my son got a starter kit for Christmas. And it tickles the exact same part of your brain that novel writing does. That world building creativity
Mm-hmm.
is almost and that plot building element that fires up in your neutrons when you're a DM, when you're a novel writer. It's the exact same neurons. And I respect the hell out of Mercer for, being that kind of creator, because like this guy's literally created an entire world, different civilizations, different structures,
And he makes it so
factions, everything.
alive too, and it
Yeah, he
feels
does.
alive as well. Which it I mean I've read fantasy novels. It's really hard to do that.
No, it's not the easiest thing in the world. And not only does he do it, he knows how to give them distinct voices. I mean, the guy is so good at what he does. He created an entire he basically created an entire thing called the Matt Mercer effect, where, like, because now every other DM has to live up to, kind of feel like they're living up to the standard he sets.
I know, yeah, right. And like, oh my god, I ran a game of about a few years ago, or I think it was last year actually. And I was like, I mean, I wasn't trying to be Matt Mercer. I was just trying to like do it, like do my thing. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't great. There was a lot of there's a lot of chicanery going on behind the scenes. I mean, the players I did get were
Well,
great. It was just no one. We couldn't like get the schedules lined up, but we finished it out. So it
many
was
such cases, many such cases. I had a home game that kind of fell apart because I kept having to work on Fridays, which was the only day I had. So we're fixing to start up another campaign at my house, me and my kids, because it's been a few months. Actually, it's been since before Christmas since we played D&D, and we're all kind of getting the itch. So I'm like, no, we can't just sit here and not play tabletop games. We got to do it. It's family time, and we all enjoy it,
are you gonna do it
except
in
my
the Black
wife.
Crown world?
No. Well, that was where my last one was in, and it did help develop some of a part of the world that wasn't explored in the book, which is Macavia, the Frozen North. But as fun as that was, there's also a lot of elements of the Black Crown that don't really fit into a D&D kind of structure, especially when it comes to the magic, because a lot of the magic is very different,
Fair enough.
and
Fair enough.
it.
That's a
uh,
struggle with my D&D game. Or well, I played it on Fate, which is like a very rules light. You know, um, I mean you can you can play many genres in it, not just fantasy. It's not as rules based because me, I have a hard time with the rules of D&D. I just get kind of annoyed. Like when we do fights, it's just. I mean, no offense to. I mean, I love the games I've played, but man, the combat just it can be agony at times. I'm like, ah, shit.
Yeah, I think the some of
Because
the
you have
rules
to
can kind of
go
bog
for
things
the
down.
turn, and then you have to move. You can't move. You have to move a particular amount of space, and you're like, oh, Jesus.
I hear you. It can kind of be that way.
It's a
Everyone gets
little
kind of tired
irritating,
of the
is all I'm
system,
saying. I really like the RPing and seeing the weird stuff that the DM or even DM just
trying to
makes up
figure
out of their ass, you know?
yeah, trying to figure out a solution to a problem. That was one of the great things that I learned is when I was a DM was you try to plan for everything, but you can't always uh, predict what your players are going to do, and then sometimes you can get out thought, and it's
No
very funny.
plan can survive the contact with actual play.
I'll give a good example. In my last campaign, I had my players find an island, and it had basically an abandoned fortress on the inside. Now, the front door was sealed with a magic seal. Now, in
Mm-hmm.
order to open it, they were going to have to go find the necromancer wizard in his wizard tower, who had the same seal, and either convince him to open it or do a job for him to open it. It was filled with zombies and warforged on the inside. And the idea was once they cleared it out, the fortress was theirs. That was their home base, right? Well, I tried to make this thing as impenetrable as possible to level 3 players. Had like a 50-foot empty moat down to the bottom, 50-foot high sheer walls to the very top. And if they had looked in the bottom of the empty moat, they would have and managed to roll high enough. They could have found a secret entrance that was down there. They didn't do that. My players said, "Okay, so how high are the walls?" I said, "By best you can guess, 50 feet." He goes, "Okay." He goes into the forest and he cuts down pine trees, passes all the checks to build a ladder, and then puts a ladder up there and scales up to it. I'm like, hmm.
I bet you're just sitting there like, fuck me.
Well, a, a petty person would have been like, okay, he's scaling the walls. I'll have an enemy up there to meet him. But then I thought, no, no, why should I punish him for outthinking me? He found us he found a solution around around the thing that I had
On the one
made
hand,
for
I
him.
imagine you were amused that he actually like thought up of that, and then on the other hand, you were like, "Fuck me."
And then it was funny because later on they went to the wizard. They did go to the wizard, and he's like, "Wait, you already got in? You cleared it out?" And they were going to kill him, but I tempted them with an airship that they couldn't access to keep him alive. But that was about the point the campaign kind of fell apart because I couldn't keep coming. Had a lot of work going on. My work schedule changed. I've been very busy lately. It's making me want to go play some D&D. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah, no, I just finished up a 4-year campaign that I was playing in a setting called Mists of Akuma. So I mean, it was, yeah, it was something.
I would love to play, but the only time I can play is when my son is the DM, and he's really loosey goosey and railroady. So it's mostly just a fun time. But to be able to play with a DM who really knows the rules and kind of lean into that, I'd really like to do that one day, maybe, but can't commit either because again, I work a lot Monday through Friday, and my schedule's never the same, so it's kind of hard to commit to anything on any week.
I mean, you also do a lot of streams on your channel. I've seen you talk to my friend Joe Carroll. You've talked about Fallout, which I need to catch up on because I haven't finished the season yet. But I digress. I mean, you mentioned Razor Fist earlier, and Andy Peliquin. I actually was talking to oh fuck me, who was I talking to the other day?
That
Oh, it was
reminds
my
me.
friend Juliana, and she was telling me about Andy Peliquin. So yeah, you've talked to a lot of people. It looks like.
I've tried to. Oh, good. Oh, good. Andy did get my message. Send him a message earlier. He's gonna. I'm hoping he'll be involved in my next video, or one of my next videos. Um, I liked what happened was when I started my channel. I was inspired by Gary from Nerdrotic, Geeks and Gamers, Eric July, Razor Fist, and I wanted to and Ethan Van Sciver and John Della Rose and all of them who built their own platform. And on their platforms, you don't have to ask for permission. You can just get on there and talk. You can get on there and do whatever you want. Uh, I think that's important for a lot of indie creators. Not everybody can do the YouTube thing, and I tried for about the first year or so to kind of follow in pop culture commentary, and there were some early videos that kind of hit the right mark, and I had some early really high viewed videos that kind of helped get me up close to 1,000, and but after a while, I kind of, it got harder and harder to stay on top of the news cycle for pop culture, right? And much as I love doing videos, like that's a whole evening of me trying to get these videos out as often as I could, responding to trailers and news events and things like that. It was about the time I started streaming that I kind of noticed that there was a bit of a need for someone to, come out there and bring indie authors and indie comic creators on. Like we had plenty of creators. We didn't always have enough platforms. So I kind of shifted the priority of my channel away from, pop culture commentary to promoting other indie creators, a few traditionally published authors who, I like. And, I just actually got one that today I'm going to interview in 2 weeks, Jenny Wirtz. And yeah. And
I've heard of
that
her.
was where
I've
that
had
was where I
I've had
started to kind of build up a little more of a name for myself, reviewing other people's books. I was reading these books anyway. I might as well turn it into content for my channel, right? I might as well.
I mean, that's fair.
I'm already reading and enjoying these things. Why not make a video out of it and talk about what did I enjoy about this book or this comic? What did I, feel could have been improved? And at least add one more voice out there and be one more platform for indie creators and indie authors to come on and get their work in front of at least a few more eyes. And I like streaming. I was very nervous about it because I was always very camera shy and nervous about public speaking, but that was one of the other things about my channel that I wanted, was to be able to improve on my public speaking, which I've long maintained. I am a much better writer than I am a speaker.
I'm the
But
same way, but here I am now. So what
yeah,
are you gonna do?
at least now I kind of feel like I've marginally improved it this some, and I could talk off the top of my head a lot better sometimes.
Oh, I make bullet points. I ramble too much if I go off the cuff.
Oh, I can't read off a script. I can't memorize a script to
Well,
save
that's
my
why I
life.
have it like on my screen. I can just kind of look back and forth.
Yeah,
No one's mentioned anything about it, so I think I'm doing something right.
yeah, it must be.
Yeah,
If you're
no.
doing something right, just keep riding it all the way.
I also
I
see you
don't.
had John Del. I can never pronounce his last name.
John Delarose.
John Del Arose. Thank you. I used to follow him back in the day, but I finally unfollowed him because I just got tired of his crap.
Sorry,
I was like,
sorry.
oh, man. But I mean, I don't
I
have
like.
anything against the guy. He's he was always nice to me when we would talk. And R.H. Snow, I actually had her on the show not too long ago. Great lady.
Oh, she's a force of nature. She's a wonderful person to talk to, and just a wonderful person in general.
Very
My
big
wife's my wife's here
personality for
wondering.
sure too.
My wife's here wondering how much longer we're going to be going.
Oh, I mean, if you need to go, I mean, we can. I'd probably go on for another like 10 minutes, and we can get off. That's okay.
That's good.
All
Another
right.
10 minutes is good.
All right, sounds good. But yeah, I talked to her not too long ago. Yeah, she definitely got me want to pick up Watcher of the Damned.
I missed that. I'm going to have to go back and watch that because she was on Beard of Darkness just last night, and by my recommendation. And I told her, I said, watch out. She's going to take this show, control this show away from you, and you're not even going to realize it. You're not going to want to steer it back. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, she has a very big personality, and those are always my favorite type of Britton's hangout hours because I like not knowing what to expect. Though
Have you read Watcher of the Damned?
I have not. I want to know
Okay.
now that I've
What?
talked to her.
Now, you heard me talk earlier about author voices in the indie spaces. She has one of the best indie author voices I've ever read because it's so unique. You can tell that her book was a love letter to westerns and Fallout and Texas itself. Texas is like the Texas wasteland is a character in and of itself, and I don't think a lot of authors
where settings are very much a character in the story. So yeah, it
yeah.
sounds like something I would like.
It's very creative and very unique, and I feel like if a traditionally published editor had gotten a hold of her work, it would have bled out a lot of her personality. But you can tell, like, this Texas housewife has put so much, love of literature and the aesthetics of all these things that she's loved, because she's an OG nerd. She was an OG nerd from back in the day. She was playing D&D when it first came out. She was playing Fallout, and when it came out for hours on end. These are not things that you usually associate with like housewives, especially ones who are in their 60s, like she is. It just does not look like it.
Yeah,
but
no, it's interesting. Yeah, she was a very interesting woman. I
mm-hmm.
We had a very interesting chat.
And that's what gives her story so much of a voice. And more, others might look at, the complaint. Others might look at her work and they might complain about story structure, about this and that and the other. But you can feel the love that she pours into her work. And I think, to me, especially as an indie author and a reader, that counts for a lot. And she didn't do something boring. Because you can do what you want and still make it boring. Looking at you here, Hideo Kojima with Death Stranding.
Oh my god!
I'm glad he was able to make.
I played a little bit of that game. I'm like, I can't fucking do this anymore. I don't know what the hell is going on.
Me either, and I hate it because the trailers were so evocative, and I was like, "Oh, this looks so interesting," and it was not. It just was
I
none of it
hated
was
carrying
worth
all
it.
that shit around. Oh my god, that
I
was
can't believe he
aggravating.
made a game where there's a character whose name is actually Die Hard Man. See, Hideo, you need an editor, okay? You need somebody to say, stay on target, And now the sequel's coming out soon, and all this gritty kind of down realistic grim horror, and you've got a guy playing a guitar that throws lightning bolts. Like, what is the fucking tone here, dude? Like, I don't know what to think. This is what happens. That's what happens when you kind of don't reel it in, and you just throw whatever you want out there. And that's I respect. I'm glad he was able to make, because Konami did him dirty. I'm glad he was able to make the game he wanted to make. I just wish he made something worth playing.
Yeah,
That
no, it's
that fucking game was so boring and not worth investing your interest in.
no, it's
Oh, it
it.
had Norman Reedus in it. So what? He
I
didn't
mean,
add anything.
it was pretty cool seeing like Guillermo del Toro and like Nicholas Winding Refn, but like that one, like again, I just wasn't interested in what was going on.
Yeah, wasn't even interesting enough to be a boring anime. But we could go on.
No,
I lost interest in a lot of his work a long time ago. Metal Gear Solid. I was so big into the first game, but the cracks were there too at the time. Like towards the last half of that game, that the narrative got really bloated, and then the hype. I don't know if a lot of people remember the hype for Metal Gear Solid 2 was off the charts.
I think that
Like
was a
I've
bit before
never.
my time, or I think I was too young for that.
Oh, dude. The hype for it was off the charts. People were just like, the PlayStation 2 hype was off the charts. And the hype for that being one of their staple games was in there. And then it came out. Now the demo was released. It was the first part of the game on the cargo ship. And then the actual game comes out, and come to find out, he pulled a bait and switch, and nobody liked it. Because you started the game seemingly as Snake after the cargo level, because you figure it's Snake's the star. You're going to be playing as him. No, you get saddled with Raiden, who is a bit of a anime twink who wields a katana sword, and just the salt that flowed out of that was legendary. You keep playing because you figure Snake's going to show up, and he does, but you don't play as Snake. But for like one little section, at some point, a lot of people realize, like, we're not going to be playing as Snake during this game. We're playing as Raiden the whole way through, aren't we? And it didn't help that the plot didn't make any sense, dude. Like that movie, that was such a disappointment.
Yeah, I remember I've never really played the Metal Gear Solid games, but I do remember there was this like fan parody where it was, because I was a big Call of Duty kid, and
Oh,
it was like Metal Gear meet. Let me look it up actually. Like this is a classic. Metal Gear Modern Warfare. Let
Metal
me
Gear.
see if that's
I
it.
thought you were about to pull up Metal Gear Awesome by Ego Raptor.
Oh no, Modern War Gear Solid. I love that series so much.
I might
And
have to give that a look.
and Mario Warfare is also fun as well.
Mario Warfare.
It's basically like it's basically the Mario games
Yeah.
just as like a shooter. It's great. I love it.
Oh, you gotta love it. You gotta love it.
um but yeah, that's a great thing about YouTube. You can just get, that's where a lot of the great like fan parodies are at nowadays.
I don't know what it is about Breaking Bad and Sopranos fans that seem to have been born with superhuman editing skills, because I'll go on YouTube and some of my favorite things are where they've edited Breaking Bad or Soprano stuff into like Skyrim and
Yeah.
Fallout or
Yeah.
Mass Effect. I saw one last night. Oh my God, it was great. I posted it on my timeline not too long ago. It was Buzz Lightyear in Mass Effect. And like the editing of Buzz was seamless.
I saw It's
Like
Always Sunny with The Last of Us. It's Frank Reynolds and the
I
Always Sun.
haven't
Oh,
seen
it's
that one.
hilarious. Oh, it's hilarious. I love that. Have you seen the Skyrim with Tony walking into oh man.
Yeah, that one's
Oh, that's a
good.
great one.
That one's
He's
great.
walking in, he's like looking around.
Man, I had a book idea that landed in my lap that everybody wanted me to write, and I'm still kind of got it on the burner cooking a little bit, from a it was an edit of Paulie from The Sopranos in Fallout. I mean, sorry, in Skyrim. And I thought, oh, that'd be an interesting Portal Fantasy isekai. What if an Italian mobster fell into a fantasy world? What would that look like? Just going around
That would be great.
shooting wizards with his 1911 cocksuckers. It would be hilarious. And
Or like having like big dinners, you know.
yeah, and I put that idea on Twitter, and the people that follow me there were so over the moon about the idea. I'm like, okay, well, I've got to write this at some point. It's still on the back burner, but I'm not ready to start working on it just yet.
Yeah, no, that does sound fun. That would be good.
I gotta have
That'd
fun
be
with
a
it.
pitch. Be like, so it's basically like
It's The Sopranos and Skyrim. I mean, the elevator pitch is right there.
yeah, pretty much. And he starts like getting all the gang together, and he's like, oh, what's this magic stuff? Oh, I can see it now.
He's got a gang. He's got a goblin. He's got an orc on the crew. Got an angry little dwarf that likes to hit people in the kneecap with his hammer.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
I'm hoping I can do it the idea justice, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's always the trick, you know. It's like the idea is one thing, and then there's
Oh
actually
yeah,
doing it. You're like,
yeah.
oh my god.
I can come up with really good ideas. The trick is the story to go around it. That was the interest. That was the thing about the Black Crown, which was I had a good concept, I had a good idea, but it took a lot of tweaking, a lot of time from conception to writing to editing to publication. It was about 3 years, and I'm hoping to speed that up a little bit because with the book two, the Lionheart, because it's been on the cooking for a couple of years as well, and I'm still in the middle of writing it at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Yeah.
hoping to get it out this year, though. Now that I know a lot more about the editing and publishing process, hopefully it'll go a little quicker.
Yeah, no, it's always a I mean, again, I haven't published anything yet, but I can imagine it's probably a lot of work to put it out there.
Yeah, it's a little work, but thankfully I do have a good team. I have a good editor. He helps me with the formatting, and I've learned a lot more about how to do it on my end as well. So, I'm not totally ignorant about the process like I was when I did the Black Crown, um, and hopefully things will go a little smoother with book two.
Yeah, I know when I'm writing, I always get worried about the plot because I'm like, how the fuck is this gonna work? Because and I used to hate that like cliche that authors would use where it's like, oh, the characters told the story. I'm like, that is cutesy bullshit. No, no way. I'm
You're
calling
telling the
bullshit on that.
story.
No, it's fucking true. I'm telling you right now. Like, they weren't just saying that to be cute, though maybe they were, but that happens. Sometimes your characters will just go somewhere and you're like, "All right, I'm writing it down."
It's not a D, yeah, it's not necessarily a D&D campaign. You can, but if you figure your characters would make an interesting decision, it's your job to kind of throw that in there and figure out how you can make it work.
Yeah, exactly. It's
What helps with me is I wrote down a general outline of where I want the story to go, not necessarily chapter by chapter, because there's a little pantsing involved with me. There were a lot of elements in the story that I came up with after I was like halfway through writing it that I didn't account for at the beginning of writing. So there were times I had to go back and add elements in. And kind of retroactively put them in. A couple of them got cut because my editor said this very much feels like it's tacked on. I'm like, okay, we'll cut that out then. But
hey, maybe
when I went back and I
maybe
looked
you
at
could like
the
do like little short stories in the Black Crown world with the stuff you cut out.
no, these were not stories themselves. These were like elements that got cut from
Oh,
the
okay,
book.
okay.
Little plot trails that would go throughout the narrative that would pay off at the end of the book. I still have a lot of that in there, but some of these just felt kind of tacked on, and one explicitly required like 3 paragraphs to explain in order for the reader to understand. And my editor said, this feels out of place, especially for the little bit of payoff that you're trying to go for. I'm like, okay, well, we'll just cut that. That's not a problem. Sometimes you got to listen to your editors, and they might know a little bit better. And I do find that you kind of have to be a little more tight with the story As much as I wanted a nice, fun romp with just the characters on the adventure, you do have to have stuff that happens. You do have to move the plot forward. You have to move the characters forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, to be fair, I mean, I didn't know what my final like reveal for my book would be till about the time I started writing it, and I read a book and I was like, oh yeah, that sounds good. I'll just throw that in there. I'm sure people will. I'm sure people won't be the wiser. It'll be fine.
You never know until you put it out there.
Um,
Um, the funny thing is, finding stuff that uh, I've discovered that it doesn't matter. I had two editors. I read my book 4 times, and right before publication, I let a little old 75-year-old lady read it. I printed it out
oh
on
no.
paper, punched holes in it, handed it to her in a binder. Just she wanted to read it really badly because I had talked to her about it. And wouldn't you know it, she gave me back. She had gone through and did some of the editing along the way because she used to be an English teacher.
Mm.
And wouldn't you know it, two editors, 4 read-throughs. This little 75-year-old lady caught what we did not. This one little spot in the beginning where I used the word price instead of prince. I'm like, and I see other indie authors do this as well. They're like, oh my god, there's still typos in this. How? Your eyes kind of gloss over when you read something enough times, and it just
Yeah,
you
yeah.
I'm guilty of that myself. I get to reading the book, and I actually get caught up in my own story, and I'll forget that I'm supposed to be watching for out of place punctuation and
Yeah,
typos.
I mean, I'm pretty anal about spelling, but even I've seen going through my draft, I'm like, oh wow, I misspelled that. Now, oh, well, good thing they caught that, and then change it.
It happens. It feels embarrassing when it happens, but it's not that big a deal.
um, yeah, I mean, not really much else I can talk about here. I mean, I don't want to cut off too much. I've enjoyed this conversation, but
Yeah,
thanks for
man.
coming on and giving your time while you're here.
Oh, it was a great time. Glad we finally were able to hook up and do something together.
Indeed, indeed. Well, when you put it that like that, it sounds kind of weird. But I'm glad we managed to get together for sure. Before I end these, I always like to ask if you have any social media. Feel free to share. You can be
You
shameless.
can find me as John A. Douglas or author John A. Douglas just about on every social media platform. Although on Twitter, I am at BLK Crown Author. I can't use John A. Douglas anymore. But on every other place, Rumble, Odyssey, YouTube, John A. Douglas, Facebook, Minds, Truth, all that stuff, John A. Douglas, and that's what I'm known about everywhere. I kind of took Eric July's advice and uh, made sure I was the same, brand name across all the social media platforms. And I try and spread out as wide a net as possible.
Fair enough. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I know I enjoyed recording it, and like we should do this again, as I like to say.
Thank
All
you for
right, take
having
care,
me.
everyone.